the Italian soldiers patrolling the woods beyond towering fences and razor wire. This is the site for the new rail link under the Alps, now an area of national strategic importance and subject to the same rules as an army barracks. They guard a project that for 20 years has been delayed by a titanic struggle. Yet this week, despite the demonstrations of the local Alpine community, work on the Italian side has finally begun.
In Italy, what is very difficult is to start. When you're started, then you can finish.
At 57 kilometres, it would become the longest rail tunnel in the world, but there is a long way to go. This week, they've hammered and blasted the first 10 metres, and this is only an exploratory tunnel.
The French President, François Hollande, promised a new direction in Europe. Less austerity, more stimulus. And this is what it looks like. Big infrastructure projects. But this tunnel will cost 8.5 billion euros to complete. If it creates the projected 3,500 jobs, that's almost 3 million euros per job.
40% of the budget will come from European taxpayers. The French, who've already completed 10 kilometres, are pushing for its final approval. In France, only 10% of Transalpine freight currently goes by rail. And even by road on the A32 to Turin, we were practically travelling alone. Susa is the bastion of the opposition, where protesters fiercely dispute the economic and environmental assessments.
We strongly believe that all this money, because it's a huge amount of money, should be spent on some other issues, like, for example, make schools safer or build new hospitals.
Cut and weld the super strength metals of the world's car and aerospace industries. So precise. But closer to Turin, companies like Prima Industrie say the new line would create jobs and investment for the region. They are leaders in laser technology. They supply machines that are their machines they were used to fashion the Olympic torch.
If the tunnel can bring Turin, can project Turin to the center of Europe, then Turin will have great opportunity to grow.
The Lyon-Turin tunnel could modernise rail travel in Europe, slashing journey times from London to Milan to 6 hours. But the final decision on whether it's worth it, that rests with the politicians who are meeting today in Brussels. Christian Fraser, BBC News, Turin.
Supporters of the plan to build a high-speed rail line between London and Birmingham are watching closely to see what happens to a huge scheme aimed at improving rail links between France and Italy. At the centre of the plan is the construction of a 35-mile tunnel through the Alps. Its supporters say the new route will enable the Atlantic to reach out to the Urals. Freight trains will zoom to and fro, boosting the shambling economies of southern Europe. Protesters noisily disagree. But the tunnelling goes on amid tight security. Christian Fraser's been to check on its progress.
He called my mobile phone sounding a little panicky shortly before our rendezvous at an anonymous motorway service station in northwest Italy. "We have to change the plan," he blurted. "They found out you're coming." This sounded interesting. My run-of-the-mill filming trip to a tunnelling project, albeit the world's most extravagant in ambition, budget and controversy, was turning into a scene from Spooks. "Who's found out what?" I asked. "The protesters," he exclaimed. "We can't meet there after all." His alarm was understandable. For 20 years, a well-marshalled army of local protesters has successfully resisted grandiose Franco-Italian plans to drill a 35-mile tunnel through the Alps. And I couldn't help feeling that perhaps their British counterparts may already be studying these tactics for any guerrilla war they launch against the London to Birmingham high-speed rail route. In Italy, they've lobbied tenaciously and at times violently in their fight against the rail link between Lyon and Turin. Some 400 people were injured in clashes with the police last year when the tunnel site was first fenced off. No wonder François Pelletier, the palpitating spin doctor, suspected a perfect storm was on its way. The protesters had discovered that we were coming to film the Italian bulldozers as they finally began to claw away at the soil of their beloved Susa Valley. And this in the same week that the very future of the gigantic project was called into question by European Union budget cuts. Sensibly, Francois directed us instead to rendezvous at a quiet local train station, and only when he was confident that we were who he thought we were did he emerge. Our clandestine journey unfolded. We had to follow Francois to the construction site. There are no road signs. Entering a motorway tunnel in the darkness, we suddenly dived off down an unmarked ramp past a few traffic cones and emerged into a surreal military zone. The Italian army has been deployed to keep the site secure. There's clearly embarrassment that while the French have already drilled and completed 6 miles of exploratory tunnels, on the other side of the border, Italian progress on a 5-mile tunnel amounts to a scrape in the mountainside, approximately 11 yards deep. It's a parking space for a double-decker bus. Only another 8,789 yards to go then. The military operation certainly made for great theatre. Camouflaged trucks, towering fences, soldiers patrolling the woods. But the protesters were also enjoying the spectacle as they camped up in the trees, lobbing rocks at bulldozers and filming us, filming them. The EU has backed the tunnel ever since its inception in the early 1990s, but its leaders agreed last week to cut the overall budget for the Union for the next 6 years, and grand infrastructure projects could be vulnerable. Last year, the French Court of Auditors projected that the final bill for the tunnel would be double the €13 billion envisaged in the 1990s. It would end up costing more than the Channel Tunnel, nor, concluded the court, was there any certainty that it would ever return a profit. Yes, it would create 3,500 jobs, but at an average cost of a staggering €3 million per job. The naysayers insist that the tunnel will be an ugly, expensive white elephant, pointing out that the existing Transalpine road and rail routes seem to cope very nicely, thank you. They claim that projections of traffic were drawn up 20 years ago and are hopelessly out of date, and they're worried about potentially dangerous minerals buried underneath the mountains being released into the air and water. Hand on heart, even the keenest of protesters would struggle to claim the Susa Valley as an area of outstanding beauty. A narrow pass, it's already crammed with the clatter of human development. A motorway stalks across the valley floor on gigantic stilts, elevated above railway lines, quarries and factories. People have tried to cross this valley in all kinds of ways. One of the first was Hannibal, the great warrior leader of Carthage, whose own Transalpine adventure ended in Susa in 218 BC. Hannibal's journey across the mountains with 20,000 soldiers and 37 fighting elephants took him just 16 days. No one stood in his way. Now those were the days.